Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in their fields of health and wellness practice and hear their stories and learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. And I'm happy to introduce today's guest, Dr. Christie Hartman. Thank you for being here with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Christie Hartman is a scientist and a writer with more than 20 years of experience in health, wellness, and food sensitivities, including the health-based blog, The Rogue Scientist. She lives in Denver, Colorado, and loves running, hiking, and 2% decaf lattes. So tell us a little bit about how you got started with your interest in this intersection of lifestyle and health and the areas in which you're working right now.
Yeah, I've always been interested in health, and I've worked, as a scientist in health for ages, mental health, public health, all kinds. But what got me started in the rogue scientist was actually COVID and the mass amount of misinformation that was out there. It was driving me nuts. And I love writing and I love blogging and I love helping people. And I thought, why can't I start this brand and get out there and help people and give them information that's evidence-based and factual and let them
Mm.
decide what they want to do with their health based on good information.
I love that. And I think that's such an important thing because today many people are very bewildered and overwhelmed in the amount of contradictory information, right? If you go to Dr. Google, talks out of both sides of his mouth all the time.
All the time.
And so it can be very hard to find good information that's really based on good science, based on experience, and what we actually see working in this whole aspect of how do we take care of our bodies. And today we're going to really kind of dive into a specific area that many people with metabolic issues are dealing with. So if you have metabolic syndrome or pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes, I know because you're the kind of people I work with all the time. I know that many of you are struggling with addictions and specifically sugar addictions. Now, is this something you have any experience with personally, Dr. Hartman?
Oh yeah.
Tell us your
I
story.
yeah, so you know, when does addiction begin? Who knows? I think that a lot of things like that start in childhood for a variety of reasons, but when I was a kid, my mother somewhat wisely, she was the primary person who raised me, at least in the early years, and wisely kind of restricted my sugar intake. I had some health issues, and I think that she just felt like it was a wise thing to do.
Mhm,
However, I was given sugar on special occasions, which is
mhm,
an interesting thing that will come up later in this conversation. So I think it started then, but my mother remarried when I was about 11. And by that age, she couldn't control everybody's diets anymore when you have
right.
new family members. And I was also old enough to spend my allowance and ride my bike to the store and get candy if I wanted it. And so that's when my sugar eating began. Also, when I started getting cavities, interestingly.
Yeah.
um, but it really kind of coalesced right around college age, in my late teens. That's when I started to feel the impact of sugar on me in a way that started to feel more like addiction. And with college kids, don't have a lot of money, right? They're just trying to get through college, and so they eat a lot of junky carbohydrates. They eat a lot of sweets. They drink a lot of beer, and all of that kind of adds up to I developed sugar addiction. I got to the point where I was getting all the classic signs, withdrawing when I wasn't eating it, and getting headaches and craving, hardcore cravings, increased tolerance, thinking about it when I when I wasn't getting it, like thinking about my next sugar hit. So yeah, that's kind of when it began, and I kind of rode through that. And it wasn't until my mid-20s that I think that I started to figure out what I needed to do.
And so, as you started looking at that, realizing you were really addicted to sugar, which a lot of people I know listening to us can relate to, How did you end up solving that?
So, what I ended up doing is when I was in my mid-20s, I made three key changes to my lifestyle, changes that at the time seemed very simple, but ended up being life-changing over the long haul. So, one is that I started exercising. I said I would exercise 3 times a week for 30 minutes, no matter what. That's very sustainable. And I said I would eat veggies every day, even if it means just eating 2 carrots, but every day adds up. And
Yeah.
likewise, I decided to get off the sugar roller coaster and I would allow myself one sugary thing, normal portion every day, which actually seems pretty generous. But when you're a sugar addict, it's like, oh, that's it. And that ended up working really well for me because it was a way I didn't feel deprived,
Hmm.
but I also it kept me to where my blood sugar was stable and I didn't have the cravings anymore. It kind of was that perfect medium for me. But it took a lot of ups and downs for a lot of those years in my early 20s, with trying to quit and then getting back on it, trying to quit, and the ups and downs with my blood sugar, my energy levels to finally get to that place where I found stability. And that ended up working for me for over 20 years. Yeah.
Wow. So that really made it sustainable for you. Do you still have like the one sweet a day? Is that still part of your regimen, your routine?
I actually ended up changing that once I got into middle age, closer to menopause.
Uh-huh.
Your things can change for people, especially women, and my sugar tolerance actually went down a little bit. And so what I do now is I actually ended up giving it up altogether for a
Mm-hmm.
long time just to see what would happen. It was kind of an experiment. I'm the rogue scientist. I do experiments on myself. And but I ended up introducing it back into my diet. But what I do is I eat it once or twice a week, and
Okay.
that's enough for me to feel healthy and to have the level of
Mm-hmm.
health I have now that I'm much older than I was in my mid-20s, but also to have that occasional treat when I want one.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really interesting because some people end up cutting it out altogether. That's their answer. Some people find a sustainable level at which this works for them long term. And I really appreciate your heart for working with people that really want to solve this problem. Why do you think people have such a hard time giving up sugar?
Oh boy, there are so many reasons. So, when it comes to the foods we like to eat, there are so many things that come into that. And
Mm-hmm.
research has shown that the foods we want to eat have little less to do with our taste buds on our tongue and more to do with what's going on in our brains. Okay. However, sweet tastes are different. They're the one exception that research has shown that humans actually favor sweet tastes over other things. So we have that working against us. Also, you have the fact that, sugar, in a way, is a drug. It does light up our brains, with dopamine in a way much not dissimilar to other junk foods and to actual drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, also, sugar is very highly processed, and that does contribute to that immediate high you get. If you eat sugar from a more natural form, like in fruit, it doesn't give you that same high because it's in a natural format and it hasn't been distilled down to be basically a drug. Also, there's kind of another piece. I think it's hard to give up because there's an emotional aspect, and I don't feel like people talk about this enough. We associate sugar with good times. You know, Childhood was rocky for me, but when I
Yeah.
think back on the times when I got at Easter, I get an Easter basket filled with candy. At Christmas, it was sugar cookies. At birthdays, you got cake, right? And
Yeah.
that is a very positive association with me, and I think it is for other people too. We get sweets when times are good, or with some families, you get sweets as a reward. Like sometimes when a kid acts up, it's like, okay, just give them an ice cream and and appease them for a while. And that can lead to issues. And so,
Yeah.
and the more troubled your childhood, sometimes those associations can be incredibly powerful.
Mhm.
So, those are a lot of reasons why sugar is so hard to give up and why we love it so much.
I think it is useful for people to take a look at what were the associations that they had in early life with
Yeah.
sugary treats. Was it used as a comfort food when things weren't going well? That's how you got to feel better. Was it used
Mhm.
as a reward? You were a good girl, so you got your ice cream, or you finished your plate, so you got dessert, right?
Yep.
Um, or was there something else around that? Sometimes there's even like other kinds of associations. Maybe it's when the family is all together, when you have a feeling of closeness, you're sharing sweets, right? Things like the holidays and the birthdays and all of those. But for each person to kind of think about what is my association, I think can be really helpful. And it's kind of funny if I was just reflecting for myself that my parents learned about the connection between refined sugary foods and cavities, and they decided they didn't want their children to have cavities. So when I was like a preschooler, even early elementary age, we simply didn't have sugar in the house, and we didn't have anything that had sugar. We used a lot of fruit and dates and other kinds of things for treats, but we didn't use sugary things. And it was back in the days when, I don't know if you remember, this might date me. You'd go to the bank and the teller would say, "Oh, you want a lollipop or
Yep.
whatever," and they would always give that out to the kids, right?
Yep.
So my mom was always very gracious. She would let us accept the goodie, but we knew that we would take it home. We were not going to be eating that on the spot. When we got home, she had a large jar that she kept on a top shelf in the kitchen, and we just put those little lollipops, suckers, whatever it was, into the jar with no expectation of ever really particularly eating them. And because we didn't ever eat them, it was like we didn't miss it. Like it wasn't like we felt like, oh no, I didn't get that treat. It's like I didn't even know what it tasted like because we
Yeah.
never had it. And she had that jar probably till I was in junior high. I do not know what happened to it after that. But the fact of the matter is, I did not grow up associating that kind of food with anything except for something up on the top shelf in the kitchen. So in college where I had free choice to eat whatever I wanted, and a lot of times get together with your friends and it's like, oh, let's go get some ice cream, right? And I would go and I would stare at the ice cream and I'd like maybe some sherbet. Like ice cream was just too sweet for me. It's like it felt too rich in my mouth. I was like, I didn't even enjoy it. So I might get a single scoop of
Amazing.
sherbet just to be social, but it was like I could
Yeah.
care less about it, right? But that's really, I would say, unusual. I don't think that's where most people are. But I think it does say something about our early childhood experiences and how they can be linked or not linked with some of these things. And I share that because if you're a grandparent or a parent, this is something to tuck away with the little children that you might be dealing with. There are actually ways to help prevent that addiction in terms of how we use food, right, with children. So anyway, that was just that it just came to my mind as we were talking about that. And I really agree with you that the emotional content associated with especially our addictions is really important to dig into. What did you find helped you deal with the emotional aspects?
It's an interesting question because back to the self-experimentation. So I did this a few years ago. I went no sugar. I just decided I'm going to see. I was having some issues. It turns out the issues were not sugar related. That's a whole other story. But for the sake of just trying things, I went off sugar for an extended period of time, like more than a year. And that's the longest I'd gone without any kind of sweets or junk food. And I wanted to see what would happen. And what I found was that, excuse me, the physical cravings went away pretty quickly. I wasn't that badly addicted at that point. I was just,
Mm-hmm.
kind of having some issues. And so that went away pretty quickly. And you'll find that for most people, the physical cravings don't take that long to start to level out. You're talking about weeks at most.
Mhm.
What was surprising to me was the emotional attachment. I missed it, even though I wasn't craving it. I liked the idea of having sugar in my life, even if my body wasn't desiring it. And that was weird to me. And I thought, well, this is interesting. So I actually did a post on Facebook. I said, hey, all you folks who've dealt with sugar issues, and you quit, how long did it take for you to get rid of the desire, the emotional aspect? And they're like, oh, a couple weeks or a month. It took me like 5 months. It
Mm,
took a long time for me to get to the point where it's like, I don't care about these
mm,
foods. So that's when it just began, and it got better over time. And so I even decided to quit over the holidays, which is the one time when I want to eat sweets more than any other time is the holidays, right? And I I would go to a party or go to an event and there'd be stuff everywhere, and I'm like, I don't care. And people would be like,
mm.
"Are you sure?" And they they would try to feed it to me. I'm like, "No, I don't want it."
Yeah.
And that was really empowering to me.
Mm,
And it taught me so much about how our brains work. We like to think that, our cravings dictate our behavior or we're kind of powerless over them. And I think in the early days, we absolutely are to some extent. But over time, you train your body and brain what to want and not want. By doing that, I showed my brain and my body that I didn't need that I didn't want that, and it didn't matter. My body adapted to my behavior. And that was a very
so
powerful
interesting.
lesson for me. Yeah,
Yeah, I like that word empowerment. That when we actually take conscious control of our behaviors and our choices, it is very empowering. We're no longer victims, right?
right.
When we see ourselves as addicts or in an unhealthy relationship with food or other people in our lives or other things, that really is disempowering to feel like a victim. But it's like when you get a handle on this, when you're actually able to rewire your brain, like you say, to not need that anymore, it really does make you feel like you're more in the driver's seat of your life, which is where I think we all need to be.
Yeah.
And so, I encourage people that are really struggling with these sorts of things to get whatever help you need to overcome that because you're giving yourself a gift when you do that. And it really is worth it. When you cut sugar out completely for like almost a year or whatever, did you find that your appreciation for sweet changed? Like, were you able to appreciate natural forms of sweetness more than you had before? Did it make a difference for you?
Yeah, that I love that question because I think that's true for a lot of people. I think a couple things happen is that they recognize the sweetness of natural foods like fruits more, or even things like nuts. Like cashews are slightly sweet, but you don't really
Mm-hmm.
notice it if you eat a lot of sweets. And then they also find that when they have processed sweets again, like cookies or whatever, that they seem like, oh my gosh, they're so sweet. It's like
Mm,
disgusting. That did not happen to me. That has never happened to me. And maybe if I would have stayed off it longer for like many years, perhaps that would
mm-hmm.
happen. I did not experience that effect, but I know quite a lot of people do. Yeah.
Mm. Well, that's interesting to know. And thank you for sharing your experience on that because I do think that a lot of people's taste buds readjust. We know they can readjust to things like less salt in your diet and other kinds of um, readjustments in your palate pretty quickly. Like the salt one can readjust in 2 or 3 weeks. Now, I think there's a lot of other wiring around sweet besides just the palate. So maybe it's why it's a little more complex. But just know that it does get easier. And like it sounds like from your experience that you were able to get to the place where it didn't just call you every time you saw it. You could say, no, I don't really want it right now. And I think that when we lose that burning desire that's associated with addictions, that it really makes it easier going forward as well. So even though getting off might be hard, would you say it's worth it?
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely 100%. Yeah, I think if you deal with sugar issues at all, try an experiment of letting it go and watch your life change, your
Mm,
health, and just the empowerment you have over the fact that you have control over your body. You
mm.
know, I think there was this point I was going to make and it went away, but it'll come back. But yeah, I think it's incredible to know how much power we have over that. And I think that sweets, I think that's the point I was going to make. I think that one of the things I've seen other people struggling with this, what they say is like, yes, I can quit now, but do I want to quit forever? Like, what about, like I'm going to feel deprived on special occasions or at Christmas or whatever. I can tell you that no, you will not. You will not care.
Yeah.
But it will take a while. It'll take a long time to get there. It's
Mm,
slow going, and that's another thing. People say, "Well, just cut it out," and it's like it's hard.
yeah.
It's emotionally hard and it's physically hard to change anything in your diet, not just sugar. To change any aspect of our diets is difficult, but your body will adjust.
What do you think the role of coaching and accountability is in helping people overcome these sorts of addictions?
I think that can be an incredible tool. It's like a lot of times we know what we need to do. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't know what to do, and we need someone to be like, okay, here's a plan. So I think coaching, it can be an incredibly important tool. So there are a couple of ways you can go about it. Sometimes, like when you're trying to reach a goal, whether it's dropping sugar, fixing your diet, exercise, whatever, sometimes you're like, I don't even know where to start. And somebody can help you with that, take you step by step. In other cases, it's like, I know exactly what to do. I just am having a hard time doing it. And sometimes you need somebody to support you and to make you accountable and to coach you and say, look, I've been there or I know what this is about. I'm here to help you. And I don't think we always understand how hugely valuable that is to have somebody in your court just there for you, trying to help you get better. It is worth way more than the cost of coaching, in my personal experience. Yeah.
I love that because I think that a lot of times we try to go alone and then we fail and then we think it's about us.
Yeah.
And when actually we were created to thrive in community. So we often need to plug into a community, a mentor, a coach, somebody that can support us, provide that accountability so that we can be successful in meeting those goals. And I think that's such a valuable service. And I want to let people know that if you look at the description right below this video, wherever you're watching it, you will see some links and some contact information for Dr. Hartman. If you want to connect with her, you'll have some opportunities to do that. And I know that she'll be happy to connect with you and provide support if that's something that you're looking for in this area of life. Do you have any last words of wisdom? Like if somebody's really struggling with this, what's maybe one of the first things they should think about doing?
I think that the one of the first things you should think about doing is asking yourself, would would having a coach help?
Mm.
And also, what I would tell them is believe in your ability to overcome this. It is absolutely overcomable, absolutely 100%. You just have to understand that in the early period, it's going to be hard. Yeah.
And I love that, we have hope. We're not stuck in these
Yeah.
addictions. There is
Yeah.
hope. As a Christian, I believe that God wants to help us overcome these things, and He can provide us with power to do that, even outside of ourselves. And whether you're a Christian or not, there are people that can support you in moving onto that journey and getting those results that you're looking for. So I just want to say thank you for being with us here today. Remember that health is wealth and it comes by choice, not by chance.
Yeah.
So glad you could be here with us.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks so much.